Next up, we have ARchTIS. I struggle to pronounce that. Market cap of 51 million, ASX code AR9. We have with us, and we welcome back Daniel Lay. The company is a global provider of innovative software solutions for the secure collaboration of sensitive information. Daniel, nice to see you again. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a real honour to have be able to present to your existing shareholders and potentially new shareholders. My name is obviously Daniel Lay. I'm Managing Director of ARchTIS. It might be a little bit difficult to say, but ARchTIS stands for Architected Trusted Information Sharing. And we solve very big, complex problems of sharing information for classified and very sensitive information. We're trusted to safeguard the world's most sensitive information, and that's not just an ambition. We do that today, and that's the market that we're growing very rapidly. So next slide, please, and we'll move on from the disclaimer. Just a quick rundown of the company. We've got a very strong global customer validation already. So we're already in the marketplace. We've got two very strong products which are already accredited and certified by agencies such as the Department of Defence, the Attorney General's Department, and others. And some of those accreditations are very high, so top secret accreditation as well as secret and protected accreditations. Very strong market in defence and intelligence agencies, not just in Australia, but more broadly. And we have a very good list of marquee global customers. We've been very strong with building alliances and networks for growth globally, including Microsoft, Thales, Raytheon, Forcepoint, KPMG. So really blue chip names that have been taking us on this journey and expanding our business opportunities. We're based in Canberra. We have our presence in London and also in Boston in the US, where it's very key cybersecurity, government, defence, industrial base markets. So we really fall, next slide if I can, we really fall into the data-centric security marketplace, and it's the fastest and most rapid growing market in cybersecurity, expected to be a $12 billion market at a compound annual growth rate of 24%. And that's really been driving our last quarter results. Revenue, unaudited figures for the year, 4.6 million in revenue. That's been primarily driven by our licensing revenue and our annual recurring revenue. So very repeatable, dependable, and very sticky revenue there. That was up 3.3%. Very high profitable company, 70% gross margins, and we keep that target in mind with everything that we do. Our operating expenses have been consistent over the last 4 quarters, and predominantly that is people. So the large investments already been made into the products, and that's now being focused, the expenditures being focused on sales and marketing for that additional growth. One interesting point to note is that we have been extremely capital efficient. Most companies that are in the cybersecurity business have been raising hundreds of millions of dollars. We've raised $25 million and got 2 mature products, and we're well ahead of where some of our competitors are in terms of revenue and percentage of growth in our business. Next slide, please. So that has been driven, at the end of the last quarter, we did the company's largest deal in our history. It was $7 million for one of our products to be expanded into the Australian Department of Defence for sharing and collaborating on information between the US and Australia. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later. As I mentioned, revenue's up 58% quarter on quarter. We are hitting that curve and growing very rapidly. Our annual recurring revenue up 68% on the prior quarter, previous comparative period, and licensing revenues up 91%. Our cash position closed at 6.6 million, but we've already received $2 million in revenue collected post-period end. And as I mentioned before, our gross margins are strong. So I'll get on to the next slide, please. So what does that mean? Well, because we closed that large deal at the end of the quarter, and our revenues being at 4.6, we're already projecting a 60% increase in terms of our revenue growth over the next financial year. So $7.5 million is expected to come in. Our cash receipts are already expected to be around about $9.5 million. not only based upon that revenue we're going to collect out of that single deal, there's also research and development grants coming in and renewals as well. So we're in an extremely strong position to have a very successful year in FY23. Our monthly cash burn is also expected to be reduced, and obviously in the economic circumstances, we're very cognizant of being very efficient with that and making sure that we're driving towards cash neutrality over the next 12 to 18 months. Next slide, please. So what is it that we actually do, and what is our differentiator, and what's driving our market? It's really, really simple. It's the digital transformation of the economy globally and the threat of cybersecurity, state actors and organised crime that's driving trusted products and security products into the market. And one of those big changes has been caused by the pandemic, where work from home has accelerated the use of information, and particularly sensitive intellectual property, whether that's in manufacturing or in intelligence and defence agencies or government agencies or industry to government agencies. That information now has escaped out of the enterprise and is now being accessed from home, it's being accessed from the cloud, and that is driving really the data-centric security marketplace. So the next slide. So our products. We have two products in the markets which have global customers. NC Protect allows us to do dynamic access control to information across the entire business application suite from Microsoft, whether that's in the cloud or on-prem. And we know that 75% of all companies use Microsoft products for collaboration. At the start of the pandemic, there was around about 60 million daily users of Teams, and now there's over 150 million daily users of Teams. And this presentation is just another example of how we're using technology very differently today than when we used to, and all of that needs to be secured. The other platform that we have is a secure content and collaboration platform for sensitive and classified information, and it is a holistic platform where you just log on through a web interface, use two-factor authentication, and you can start collaborating and sharing information with the parties that you choose to do that with at very highly controlled security levels. And that's been exceptionally popular in the research and education space, government to industry, industry to government, and particularly defence and intelligence market. In fact, Cogency has grown over 100% in the last 12 months as a platform and product with clients. So we can identify and classify sensitive information, we proactively block it, and we can definitely audit and report all of that to any level. If I go to the next slide, what does all of that mean? Well, it's all about dynamic, context-driven policy enforcement. And I'll go and explain that very quickly so that you get a very simple concept of what we do. Dynamic means every time we request access to information, it checks whether or not anything has changed to your permissions as to why you should or should not have access to that information. Context means that if I'm sitting in the Qantas club and I wanted to connect to the Qantas Wi-Fi, it would look at that and say, well, how strong and how trusted is that network? What information should I be able to access given the risk of not using a trusted pathway or a trusted device to access that, and that I'm in a public space? So all of a sudden, if I'm in the building where I work, I get different access to different quality of information and different views of that information, and I can do different things to that information. We can do that across dates and times and site permissions, locations, who the author was, and we look at the attributes of that user as well and say, how are they coming in? What's the trusted path? And it dynamically changes the access to the information without the user doing anything. And that's very, very powerful. Previously, that's been all of those type of controls have been very, very limited in terms of network control. Now we're actually doing it to the data, so the data is free to travel and the value of that data can be truly unlocked. And that's really our differentiator. And only a handful of companies are doing this around the world. Next slide, please. And that demand has been validated through our customers. We have global customers around the world. Those global customers are expanding, not only in terms of the number of customers, but the usage inside of there. So we have a sell-through, sell-to strategy, and you can see that a number of our partners who are selling us also have bought the products. And when I say bought the products, I mean both Cogency and NC Protect. Cogency they use to secure their supply chain and collaborate with partners, and NC Protect they use to secure their internal networks where they're using Microsoft products such as Microsoft 365 or Office 365. We also secure large government agencies for their on-prem security as well. But a good example of that, a couple of customers and what they use us for is KA Care. That's the King Abdullah Center for Atomic Research and Energy. And we protect all the nuclear power plant plans for Saudi Arabia. Corning, if you're using a smartphone and you're using an iPad or a tablet, usually that technology has come out of Corning, and we protect all the intellectual property for that company. School for Kids, we protect their educational curriculum and the intellectual property that they develop for that. And they've a recent partner that I've just gotten back from Singapore, where they've launched that program over there. And it's quite fascinating to see the different types of use cases that we're discovering. On to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to quickly talk about the latest validation that we've got from the Australian Department of Defence. That award has $3.4 million in annual recurring revenue over the next 2 years. It has a third option on that. It came off the back of a $4.2 million program of work that they sponsored us for 2 years ago. It is a high growth area of the Australian Department of Defence, and it's expected to expand, and we're already seeing an increase in services and fees for that at this early stage. So part of that services and hardware, part of that contract is services and hardware, and that's because we're integrating it into their ecosystem as an on-prem platform, which means it's going to be incredibly sticky for us. The outlook of that means that we've got $5 million in annual licensing for FY23. It increases us up from that 3.3. So that's going to continue to grow. Our FY24 outlook is adds an additional licensing to that. And of course, it brings in terms of cash receipts, $7 million across financial year 23, which is, again, a great springboard for the business at the start of financial year 23. Next slide, please. Just wanted to focus you on this. This use case here, the quote is probably what is most important, and this really describes what we do so well. We had to lock everything down, so very few users could access content to the extent that it inhibited our ability to collaborate with our coalition partners in theatre. And that's what NC Protect solves for them. It opens up their ability to collaborate and share information in a vastly more secure way, so they can actually use the information to be shared across the allied base. Next slide, please. Our business model is extremely scalable. We're very focused on the government and defence industry and the manufacturing. Next slide, thanks. Particularly important when you've got a tight geopolitical situation, which is increasing the drive, and the defence industry and the defence industrial base have got world record expenditure at the moment. But that market is not going away. We're very focused on the big government and defence sales. We don't expect those sales to be, they do take a little bit longer, but they're incredibly sticky. And once you're in there, they stay there for a long, long time. We also have our alliance partners looking across the enterprises, and our channel partners down in the corporate SME area is all constantly expanding. Next slide, thanks. As I mentioned, we've now been very focused on investing over the last 18 months to build up our global infrastructure to expand the business, and we're in a position for growth. And that growth is, pipeline is now at a record high. Next slide, thanks. So we're executing our strategic growth. We've done everything that we said we'd do over the last couple of years. We're seeing exciting opportunities. The market's validating us, and we're still focused on the high-end market. And a good example of that is the Australian Department of Defence is spending $273 billion in capability uplift. $15 billion of that is just being spent in information and cybersecurity alone. We've been very strategic about winning that and then exporting those wins into the US market and the UK market. And that's where we see the growth coming over the next 12 and 18 months. We're going to leverage those key partnerships with Microsoft, TELUS and Raytheon. They both use our products. They're also on board to sell those products. And we're going to continually innovate our products to stay at the leading edge and making sure we have that competitive advantage. In fact, Microsoft, the reason we have such a strong relationship with Microsoft is we're currently doing things that they can't do with their own technology. Last slide, thanks. So why invest now? We're in an excellent value. I think with the terms and conditions of the market, we're probably a little bit undervalued, but it's all about that growing annual recurring revenue. It's repeatable, it's a strong growth, it's predictable. Many of our contracts have been sole source, and that money certainly has been a multi-year contracts on the majority of those. We're industry leading, and we've got industry leading partners and alliances. The tailwinds for our marketplace are unprecedented. Now, just think about what's happening with Taiwan most recently, the war in Ukraine, the NATO response to that. All across the world, the need to share this classified information is becoming stronger and clearer in terms of protecting democracies and common values across those alliances. And of course, now we're in a position where we can globally distribute our world-leading products, which are validated by, the Australian Department of Defence, Australian Intelligence, and the Australian Government. Thank you.